Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing Masonry and social media.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to the Working Tools. Today we have with us our usual hosts, Worship Brother Stephen Chung from the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon, very worshipful Brother David Colbeth down here in Washington with me, and I'm Matt Apple. And we have with us our special permanent guest, potential co-host guy who's hopefully going to keep coming. We don't scare him off. Jared Dunham. I'm sorry, I don't know. Worshipful Brother Jared Dunham?
Yes, worshipful Brother Jared Dunham.
Well, welcome, no matter what, and who's been on the show before, might I add. And today we are going to be discussing the social media and Freemasonry. So I've said before on the show that some of the worst things I've seen on social media have unfortunately been posted by my brother Masons. And it seemed like a topic a lot of people have been on social media more than ever in the last 18 months or so. And we've seen some interesting things. So guys, do you have any exciting examples of social media missteps or things you've seen that are good?
Well, I don't know if we could talk about it, Steve, but in the blue room there, we were talking about some current examples of what's happening. If you can leave out the names and lodge numbers, but it would be something to get us started anyway.
Well, in BC, we had a Grand Lodge who came out with a social media policy, just some guidelines to try and help govern members or to help members govern themselves, I think would be more the object of it. And last year we had a worshipful master of a lodge who posted a controversial picture and statement. And the lodge basically lost their shit and didn't know what they really wanted to do with it, except that they felt that this brother's post was to the point where they thought he should be expelled from Freemasonry, and that's the path that they went on. And their path had nothing to do with the social media policy. It was all political. But when they realized that they weren't going to get anywhere with their reasoning and their justifications, because it was obviously a political thing, somebody pointed out that it was it was opposing the social media policy that came out a year prior. And so even though the worshipful master should have read that policy, he obviously did not. And they hung him out to dry on the social media policy. And that got him a 1-year suspension. Okay. And the Grand Lodge suspended him from Freemasonry for 1 year. And it's posed a lot of problems in our, not only in that lodge, but in our jurisdiction. And so brothers should really be careful what they're posting out there, especially when they're an officer of a lodge, whether you're worshipful master or not. When you're an officer of a lodge, you're considered a representative of that lodge. You represent that lodge out in the public as principal officers. And so they expect you to keep that decorum out there in the public as well.
So but you said two things that I find curious in what you just said there. First of which is, when you say political, do you mean political within the lodge, or do you mean political like he was referencing the whatever national, some political party and that sort of political?
It was a comment regarding the political movement. And actually, it was the post actually just had to do with an image that was being used in that political movement, and it was seen as to be quite controversial, right? And
Oh no, I was just going to say that more pertinent to our current discussion, actually. So you said the word social media policy, and I'll tell you, as a recently district deputy, I stopped 18 months ago or so now, 12 months ago. Anyway, point is that the one of the things that was on my checklist to ask the lodges when I did my inspection of the lodges was, do you have a social media policy? To which every single lodge always said, no. So is this a social media policy? You're talking about a Grand Lodge policy, or was it an individual lodge policy?
No, it is a Grand Lodge policy, and if you, I was going to look it up on our website there, freemasonry.bcy.ca. I believe on there is the social media policy. You may have to be a member, of which I am, and I can get in there. But I do have a copy of the policy that I downloaded, and yeah, it's meant to prevent how we make Freemasonry look in the public eye. Is preventing us from making errors in that way, right?
Because I don't know that our David, do we have one of those?
Well, I was just thinking that I know there was a policy sent out at one point, but I don't know if it was sent out as a Grandmaster's more of an edict than a real policy, but it did say social media policy. I was thinking about looking it up, but at some point we had a social media policy, some guidelines to follow, but I think that our obligations to each other and to the craft have some built-in policies, I think. And so the idea of politics specifically, or religion or other things, the way I look at social media is that I say it's my front yard. And so if I go post a sign out in my front yard with a statement, unless I say, well, first of all, would I post that sign in my front yard so everybody can see it? And that's always my buffer, my initial buffer. Do I want my neighbors and everybody driving by to know this about me, or to know what I think or how I think or whatever? Because it's going to be there. And I also say it's in cement. You can't be moved, right? Once I post it, it's there forever. That's my buffer. And then the second part is, I don't think, unless I put a little note on the sign that says comments accepted, it's not okay for you to come into my yard and put your sign next to my sign. So I look at it in the reverse. If you post something on your page, unless you say it's okay, or I know about you that it's okay to comment, I don't care how controversial it is. I'm basically getting out of my car or driving over to your house, getting out of my car and going onto your front lawn and pounding in my own stake or my own sign into your yard in support or contradictory to your statement. So when people come on to people's posts and make their comments, so that's what usually happens. I appreciated Matt's idea that some of the most controversial stuff come from Masons. I think we're just, in that regard, we're people too, and that not, well, we have a reminder under Masonry we're supposed to do. You can get caught up in this kind of auction mentality, or keyboard courage, we used to call it, mentality of posting and then somebody posting and then posting and posting, and pretty soon you're in way over your head on comments and areas that you didn't plan on. Maybe it was a relatively vanilla post about something, and now it's really controversial.
Well, yeah. So I've got our policy up. It's a one pager. Okay, so, but in the top, in the opening paragraph, it talks about. It recognizes that social media has grown exponentially in the years, and a goal of supporting the regular extensive use of it. But we know that many brethren regularly connect by Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, and other means. But we as Freemasons must be mindful that our individual postings not only reflect our own character, but that of Freemasonry across the jurisdiction, right? Because if you're putting it out there that you're a Freemason, then your character is always being judged. And so I can go through it. There's lots of there's a page of bullets here. A Freemason should conduct himself with the same courtesy he would in front of the general public. He must be aware that his postings are a permanent record and therefore his conduct may influence the world with a positive or negative opinion about him personally and the organizations to which he belongs. Right? The Freemason should never use disparaging comments, profanity when posting, including but not limited to graphic video and audio recordings. Right. So when you post controversial images, right, that you're kind of breaking this policy, right? And that's what this brother had done. It's kind of sad in a sense because it's taken politics and brought it into lodge, right? Because it was a political related post. And, no matter what, I was told that we don't talk politics or religion. And this is the reason why. It causes a great divide, right? So now you've got a younger membership of the lodge who's all supportive of their worshipful master. And then you've got a handful of old guys from the background that are totally offended by the post, right? So the really hard part, really, to be honest with you guys, is the fact that, the comments coming from the newer members after this happened, they said, one of the comments to me was, I just got raised as a master mason. And then I watched them do all this stuff to their worshipful master, which is in direct contravention to what they just taught me.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, because the new Master Masons would have been like the big thing that they would have been just told is that you whisper quiet counsel when you want to correct someone. You don't stand on a soapbox and, I mean, social media is kind of weird because I had someone actually once liken it to standing in the middle of a mall and yelling your opinion at the top of your voice, to just absolute strangers. Would you do that? And if not, don't post it.
Or the idea, would you tell that to your grandmother?
Right.
Well,
yeah,
mine's dead.
Or like David said, would you post that on your front lawn?
Yeah.
Because, if you know that posting that on your front lawn is going to get you eggs thrown at your door, well, do you really want to do it?
Right.
Right. And, I guess it's these days when you do these social media posts, you really got to think about these types of things because I've known several people that have had them comments come back days later from people who finally got their news feed and saw the post and comments would come back. But they don't think about how it looks. They don't really care. A lot of social media's posts, there is absolutely no forethought gone behind them.
No, they figure that it's a one-way direction. You're saying something and nothing comes back.
Oh, and everyone always agrees with everything I say.
Well, yeah.
Speaking of things that doing homework during class, essentially, David and I, about at the same time here, apparently found on the Grand Lodge of Washington website the social media policy. So we do have one. Apparently, I should have looked that up before we had the show. But
Mr. District Deputy Grandmaster.
The point number 5 of the 5 points is that brother-to-brother intervention should be the first course of action. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whispering wise counsel is definitely preferable to duking it out in public.
And when somebody errs, I mean, we talk about in Freemasonry how we take good men and make them better, right? Well, what was this guy before this post? He was a good man. He'd been in Lodge 12 years. He'd given his all to the Lodge. He fully immersed himself in the organization, and is now their worshipful master. 12 years later, he's also involved in the other bodies in the valley, Scottish Rite, and so on. And he was very well respected for the work that he did, and so now he makes an error in judgment. and everybody castrates him right away. But we're supposed to help him learn from his errors and improve himself so he can move forward in life. And instead, I just you see all this condemning and crucifixion, like without even proper procedures. Not even having a hearing. No, this is bad, and we're protecting our lodge. They haven't even told half their lodge what they did, right? I mean, now granted it's been pandemic, but they've had Zoom meetings, right? Yet a year and a month later, some lodge members don't know what's been going on for the last 6 months. They have no idea because they didn't get it communicated to them, right? So now they're all asking questions, and now it's very awkward, right? So it makes it really, really challenging. And the brother who did that, he totally regretted offending any of the membership. He had never, with his post, he had never intended to offend anybody. He intended a thought-provoking question to incite a debate online, right? But he's a political guy. He was part of a political party. That's his world, right? Politics. So he was doing that. And so, where do you draw the line in that, right? It's challenging.
Yeah, I think too that when Masonry in many cases, I believe, was born out of some of those controversies. And so having be careful where we go down this rabbit hole. My personal belief is that the idea of not discussing religion and politics in lodge, while maybe accurate in a tiled setting, is not necessarily accurate in what we are doing here. Basically, the idea of the after lodge. How else can you? Was that a no, Matt? Don't talk, or was that an itch? It's like, when you're having the meeting after the meeting, and then the meeting after the meeting in the parking lot, how else do you get to know guys and to get to explore ideas of what they believe or don't believe or how they act? I mean, yes, we're supposed to be similar and be good men before we start. That's maybe a topic for another show. That we're supposed to only bring in good men. And we may not find out they're always good men, maybe not in the first year, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe it takes a while to really realize, hey, this guy really wasn't as good as we thought he was. But I think this is should be a perfect avenue or perfect venue for us to talk to each other and explore potential religious experiences or backgrounds or information. Or when I say politics, I don't necessarily mean the politics necessarily, but the idea of belief systems and understand more about our brothers and about other. I had an interesting conversation with my 13-year-old daughter the other day about religion, and I was surprised at how either she was really just staring off into space, but I was going to say how we had a good conversation that she was listening, but she did have feedback. And so it was interesting to have her talk about her thoughts and ideas, and that why do we say we're one religion is because the way you were born, usually into that religion. Most of the time people don't go out and explore and experience other religious beliefs. They're just who they are because of how they were raised. If you lived in a different country, you probably would be generally that religious belief, whatever that area's religious belief is. Or if you were born into a particular group in a country, you'd be. So I would encourage people, and I think this is a great opportunity for Masons to explore those other ideas, whether they be in most countries, many countries, at least in the United States anyway, the politics were born out of Masons or born out of these historic organizations. So what other place could we, or in theory, be in a sacred space to have these honest and open discussions with each other about these ideas? Facebook is not that quiet and secret place to do that, for sure. But yeah, while I don't post it in my front yard, I might ask Jared and Steve and Matt to come in my backyard on the deck, and let's have these conversations, and let's talk about it, and maybe have a little bit of a kerfuffle and understand who we are, and then part as brothers, understanding more about it. But yeah, Facebook, again, I go back to the keyboard courage. Facebook is not the place to do it, or Instagram, any of the, I don't want to get banned by Facebook by saying their name too many times, but
Yeah, like there's brothers I've got that I know that they believe in QAnon, and they've gone deep into rabbit holes that way, and some are flat Earth guys, and I know that they have these beliefs, and that's okay. They're entitled to their own religious beliefs. We encourage that, right? So we don't discuss it. We go to the shooting range. We hang out. We have a good time. We go for lunch. We go motorcycle rides. We go. We do all these things together. Um, but we just don't talk about their religious beliefs because we don't see eye to eye on them, right? Or not that we even don't see an eye to eye. It's just, I know nothing about QAnon. I'm not going to sit there and get into a heavy discussion or debate with somebody about it, right? So I respect the fact that that's their choice to believe that, right? And not mine, right? And they respect that too. So, it is possible to, still have brief discussions like you're talking about, and still carry on as brothers and not have any animosity between each other.
I think kind of interesting on your point. One of the problems that we run into when we try and discuss things with other people is that the person that we're discussing it with isn't hearing us giving them what we think. They hear us trying to change what they think. And that's where all of this starts getting into a big kerfuffle, is that we need to be more open to just listening to each other and understanding where their opinions come. I mean, I may think that someone might be a complete nut or nut bar, but until I hear their rationale behind what they think, I'm not going to understand where they're coming from, or even if I am right. I mean, they may actually totally, make sense in their mind, or even convince me otherwise. But until we sit down and discuss things with each other without trying to convince the other person of our opinion, and which is what I think Freemasonry does with us, is we learn to debate and toss ideas about and listen to each other so that we can better understand other opinions and either know that we are correct in what we think, or to see the flaws in our thinking and maybe go back and rethink it.
I agree. There's definitely I don't know what the word is, a hubris. A lot of people, I mean, not just in Masonry, and of course not me or any of the four of us, but
no,
there's definitely a I know the right and I'm not going to change my opinion vein that runs through a lot of conversations that, sometimes, maybe I've been wrong in the past, I'll admit it. And sometimes it's one needs an open mind about such things in order to grow as an individual. For making good men better, and those men have to be willing to, how do you get better? You change, right? So you have to be willing to change and to think about things.
That's right. And this example with this worshipful master I was talking about, he has not heard from a member of his lodge in a year, right? And he has spent a lot of time reflecting on what he posted, why it upset the membership, and what could he have done differently in trying to achieve the same outcome. And all he has in his mind is regret, because he doesn't really know what he could have done differently, right? Because he was posting a political statement, and he was heavily involved in politics. And he says, I can't change a political belief like that. I'm, he says, but that was me posting something politically on my stuff, my personal stuff outside of Lodge.
That was
right?
going to be my question. So this was not like he posted this on his lodge's Facebook
No,
page. He just did it on his
no.
own personal page.
On his own, right? And so he really, was at a loss because it shouldn't have. But these guys were so offended by it that
I think it depends
didn't really matter.
on what he's posting, though, because as you indicated earlier, he represents the lodge. Well, whether he represents the lodge as an officer or a member, whatever, I think if people know him to be a Mason, if he's got Masonic stuff woven in on his post as well, then they're going to see that, oh, well, that's how Masons think, not necessarily how the lodge thinks, or as a representative of. People don't know that you're an officer or master. They don't know what that means generally. They just know you're a Mason. So they assume, oh, well, all Masons must think that. I think that's where the issue becomes.
Right. And I could see that if he had crossed his platforms, but he doesn't. That was his political platform, and everything on that profile of his was political, right? Had never anything to do with Lodge, right? But it only took 3 minutes for the old past master of his lodge to be all find out about it and be upset, right? So, and it was only 5 minutes, or it was only 5 minutes for the political party to be all upset with him and everything else too, right? So, how quickly social media spreads. Now that could be a whole other topic of conversation, because it was a matter of minutes and his life was upside down.
Right. I will say, interestingly, the Washington Masonic Code, I happen to have it in front of me, specifically prohibits charges. Point 3 here is against a brother involving matters of a political or sectarian nature. So I'm not. The way I would read that is, if you say, woohoo, party A down with party B, that's not really a reason for Masonic charges, at least under our code.
Right. Maybe not from Masonic charges, but going back to Stephen's point is he may not have posts showing, like he may not cross his political and Masonic posts, but his friends list, his friends will know probably that he is a Mason. And you always have to, because of the history and the, all the other conspiracy theories and stuff, we always have to be cognizant of the fact that if someone knows that we are a Freemason, whatever comes out of our mouth is the gospel truth of what every Freemason thinks.
Right. Especially when you're, Matthew Appel and you're so well known in your jurisdiction, everybody believes every word out of your mouth. Right. Yeah, that's right. He's highly respected in his jurisdiction. Right. He knows things, he's in charge. Right. Well, people look at people a little more closely when they're in charge. Right. So, I guess the lesson there is to, really don't post things on social media that you don't really want coming back at you.
I think too, I don't mean to belabor this conversation, but your point about him being regretful is a powerful understanding of yourself. And so the members of the lodge are actually missing out on the opportunity to learn from his experience if they're not wanting him to come. And so whether he goes back to that lodge or is successfully or not, or he moves to another lodge, the idea that he couldn't still be a quality man or still couldn't be a Mason, I think is false. And that, boy, if he actually has stepped over that threshold of, as Matt talked about, listening, and we've all talked about, Jared, everybody has talked about listening, taking the time to listen and understand and change, become a better person. Boy, he's right there in the middle of it. What a great opportunity for him to be able to teach about that and to be the example of understanding and listening and change.
Yeah. Well, I said to him when I was having a conversation about whether or not he wanted to come back and actually even sit in front of his lodge. And he said, I've swallowed the pill, a big enough pill over this last year that I think that I need to man up and be willing to take, whatever's coming my way. And so, yeah, I'll stand up and I'll sit in the chair and I'll own my shit, as people would say. And he's prepared to do that, so I don't see why the guys are not even inquiring. Nobody even asked the guy, so what over the last year, what's happened to you? Nobody's even inquired. They just like hell bent that, he paid his dues, his 1 year suspension, but they don't care. They still want him out, right? It's hard, but what's going to be really exciting over the next year? Guess who's the director of education for my district? So my education might change this year, right? And have a few focal points, right? And really open up and peel back the degrees that, talk about how we're supposed to treat each other and help each other and so on, right? So the meanings behind our degrees get into the allegory.
And on that note of potential personal growth, on behalf of Stephen and Jared and David and myself, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools Masonic podcast. And if you want to come to our social media page, we do have a Facebook page, so please please come and check it out. But seriously, thank you all for listening, and we look forward to having another show soon of the Working Tools podcast. Good night.